A black woman in scrubs thinks she can tell a real cop what to do? Officer Daniel Mercer sneered, slamming both hands onto the hood of the speeding ambulance before yanking open the driver's door. Rain poured over his uniform as he marched to the back and violently pulled the rear doors apart, glaring at Dr. Maya Brooks, the black emergency physician desperately treating her dying patient. "People like you always think a white coat makes you important," he mocked with a cold laugh. "To me, you're just another loud black woman making excuses." Maya refused to look away from her patient. "He's bleeding internally. We have less than 5 minutes." Mercer shoved a trauma bag onto the wet pavement, scattering IV kits, medication, and surgical supplies into muddy water. "Save the performance," he scoffed. "Nobody's handing out medals because you can yell louder than everyone else." He grabbed Maya's wrist just as she reached for a syringe. "Stop! You're killing him!" she cried. Mercer stepped between her and the patient, blocking the ambulance doors with his body. His lips curled into a smile. "Maybe that's exactly what someone is paying me to let happen." The cardiac monitor exploded into a long, piercing tone. "Flatline." The paramedics froze. Ignoring the tears mixing with the rain, Maya threw herself onto the patient, performing chest compressions with everything she had while horrified drivers recorded every second. Then the highway shook. A convoy of black SUVs thundered through the storm, followed by heavily armored federal vehicles that surrounded the ambulance from every direction in seconds. Officer Mercer slowly turned toward the flashing lights. His smile disappeared. "Stay with this story, because what happens in the next few minutes will expose a truth no one at that scene saw coming. Before we continue, tell us where you're watching from and your local time in the comments. We'd love to know who's joining us today. And if stories about courage, justice, and standing up for what's right inspire you, consider subscribing so you never miss the next unforgettable journey." The blinding floodlights from the black SUVs washed over the rain-soaked highway. But before anyone could understand who had arrived, the story had already begun nearly an hour earlier. Dr. Maya Brooks had started her night shift the way she had begun hundreds before it, walking through the crowded emergency department at Franklin Regional Medical Center with a calm smile despite the chaos surrounding her. At 38, Maya had earned a reputation that reached far beyond the hospital walls. Nurses trusted her judgment without hesitation. Young residents admired her composure. Families remembered the black physician who never stopped fighting until there was nothing left to give. She never cared about awards. She cared about people. That evening had already been exhausting. A freeway collision, a child with severe asthma, a heart attack victim. One emergency flowed into another until the overhead speakers suddenly interrupted everything. Code Gold. Incoming trauma. Estimated arrival 2 minutes. Every conversation stopped. The trauma team rushed into position. When the ambulance doors burst open, paramedics wheeled in a middle-aged man covered in blood. His expensive suit had been sliced open by trauma shears. Glass fragments glittered across his chest, and his blood pressure was dropping by the second. "What happened?" Maya asked while slipping on fresh gloves. "Vehicle explosion," one paramedic answered. "Single survivor," another leaned closer. He kept saying someone wanted him dead. Before Maya could ask another question, the patient's eyes fluttered open. His lips trembled. They're coming." His voice faded into silence. Within seconds, Maya ordered blood transfusions, emergency imaging, and rapid stabilization. The CT scan revealed multiple internal injuries. Without immediate surgery at the Federal Medical Trauma Center 20 miles away, his chances of survival would disappear. As nurses prepared the transfer, 2 men in plain suits quietly entered the trauma bay. Neither introduced himself. One simply showed a badge for less than a second before slipping it back inside his jacket. His voice remained low. "Dr. Brooks." "Yes?" "You'll personally accompany this patient." Maya frowned. "I'm needed here." "Not tonight." "Why?" "I'm not authorized to explain." She looked from one man to the other. "This isn't standard procedure." "No," the older man admitted. "It isn't." Before Maya could question him further, another nurse rushed over with updated lab results. The mysterious visitors disappeared as quickly as they had arrived. She barely had time to process the encounter. Minutes later, the patient was loaded into Ambulance 12. Rain hammered the windshield as sirens pierced the night. Inside the moving ambulance, Maya checked another unit of blood, while veteran paramedic Luis Ortega monitored the patient's breathing. "You've been awfully quiet," Luis said. Maya adjusted an oxygen mask. "Something feels wrong." "The explosion?" "Everything. She glanced toward the unconscious man. The two government guys. Luis raised an eyebrow. You noticed them too? They never even gave me their names. Luis hesitated. They spoke with dispatch before we left. What did they say? They told us to avoid the interstate. Why? They didn't say. A strange silence settled over the ambulance. Only the rhythmic beeping of the cardiac monitor filled the compartment. Then Maya noticed something. The patient was gripping her sleeve. His eyes had opened again, barely. With enormous effort, he whispered only 4 words. They're inside. His hand fell away. Inside what? Inside the hospital? Inside the police department? Inside the government? Before Maya could ask another question, the patient lost consciousness again. Luis immediately checked his pulse. We're losing pressure. Maya increased the IV fluids. Come on. The ambulance accelerated through sheets of rain. 3 miles from the trauma center, flashing blue lights suddenly appeared in the side mirror. Luis frowned. What now? The police cruiser rapidly overtook them before swerving directly across the highway. Its tires screeched. The ambulance slammed on its brakes. Medical equipment crashed against the cabinets. The patient nearly rolled off the stretcher. What is he doing? Luis shouted. Maya grabbed the stretcher just in time. Outside, Officer Daniel Mercer stepped from his patrol vehicle with infuriating confidence, casually adjusting his rain-soaked uniform as if he had all the time in the world. He didn't look concerned. He didn't look curious. He looked prepared. Prepared for this exact moment. Luis reached for the radio. Officer, this is a critical transport. Mercer ignored him. Instead, he slowly walked toward the ambulance while speaking into his shoulder microphone. His expression never changed. Maya felt an uneasy chill crawl down her spine. Something about his timing made no sense. This wasn't a random traffic stop. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a misunderstanding. Before Mercer even reached the driver's door, Maya noticed him glance not at the ambulance but directly toward the unconscious patient through the rear window. Just for a second, then he smiled. It was small, cold, almost satisfied. Maya had spent her entire career reading faces. She had seen fear, shock, grief, relief, but she had never seen anyone smile at the sight of a dying man. That single expression unsettled her more than anything else that had happened all night. Mercer finally reached the driver's window. Instead of asking about the emergency, instead of requesting identification, instead of offering assistance, he slowly removed his flashlight, tapped it twice against the ambulance door, and said with unsettling calmness, "Nobody leaves until I say they do." Maya stared at him through the rain-covered glass. For reasons she still couldn't explain, she suddenly realized this man wasn't trying to enforce the law. He was trying to stop the ambulance from reaching the hospital. And somewhere inside her, a terrifying question began to form. Who wanted her patient dead badly enough to turn an emergency transport into a trap? Rain pounded against the ambulance so violently that it almost drowned out the patient's weakening heartbeat. Dr. Maya Brooks stepped down onto the slick pavement, shielding the rear doors with her body. "Officer, this patient has multiple internal injuries," she said, struggling to keep her voice steady. "If we don't reach the trauma center immediately, he won't survive." Officer Daniel Mercer didn't even glance at the medical monitor. Instead, he slowly removed a pair of latex gloves from his pocket, pulled them on one finger at a time, and shined his flashlight directly into Maya's eyes. "I'll decide what's urgent." Luis Ortega climbed out from the driver's seat. "Sir, dispatch already knows we're transporting a critical trauma patient." Mercer shrugged. "Then dispatch can wait." He walked around the ambulance as if inspecting an abandoned vehicle instead of a medical emergency. His flashlight paused on the blood smeared across the rear bumper. "Looks like somebody had a rough night." Maya clenched her fists. "Please." Mercer ignored her. He opened one of the side compartments, carelessly tossing sterile blankets, oxygen tubing, and sealed medication packs into the rain-soaked roadway. Boxes burst open. Bandages floated into muddy water. Luis stared in disbelief. "Those supplies are sterile." "They're evidence now," Mercer replied without emotion. "There is no crime scene here," Maya protested. Mercer slowly turned toward her, his lips twisting into another cruel smile. "A black doctor getting emotional doesn't impress me." Several drivers had stopped along the shoulder. Phones appeared. People began recording. Instead of backing away, Mercer grew bolder. He pointed toward Maya loudly enough for everyone to hear. "She keeps screaming because she's hiding something." The crowd exchanged uncertain looks. Maya's heartbeat quickened. "This is a licensed emergency transport. Verify my credentials if you want, but let us leave." Mercer laughed. "Credentials?" He extended one hand. "Let's see them." Without hesitation, Maya handed over her hospital identification. Mercer studied it for less than a second. Then, to everyone's shock, he dropped it directly into a puddle. The plastic badge disappeared beneath dirty water. Oops. Luis took one furious step forward. You had no reason to do that. Mercer's right hand instantly rested on his holstered weapon. Careful. The warning froze everyone. Inside the ambulance, the cardiac monitor suddenly changed rhythm. Beep, beep, beep. Faster. Irregular. Maya immediately climbed back inside. Blood pressure was falling again. He's crashing. She reached for epinephrine. Mercer grabbed the rear door before she could close it. Nobody administers anything until I'm finished. She stared at him in disbelief. You cannot interfere with medical treatment. I just did. Her patience finally broke. If he dies because of you, every camera out here will remember your face. Mercer leaned closer until only she could hear him. You still think this is about traffic enforcement? A chill ran through Maya. What does that mean? Instead of answering, Mercer looked at the unconscious patient. His expression became strangely focused, almost expectant, as though he were waiting for something. Maya followed his eyes. The patient's fingers were moving, tiny involuntary twitches. Then, with enormous effort, the man slowly opened his eyes. His lips barely moved. Maya bent closer. What is it? His voice was little more than air. Phone. What phone? He swallowed painfully. Under. Before he could finish, his entire body stiffened. The monitor erupted into a violent alarm. Luis looked up. We've lost his pulse! Everything happened at once. Maya threw herself over the patient. Start compressions. Luis ripped open the emergency airway kit. Another paramedic prepared the defibrillator. Outside, Mercer folded his arms. He never called for backup. He never requested another ambulance. He simply watched. 1. Full. 3 minutes of desperate CPR. Sweat mixed with rain on Maya's face as she counted compressions. Come on. Nothing. Luis charged the paddles. Clear. The patient's body jerked violently. Still nothing. Again. Clear. A second shock echoed through the ambulance. The monitor hesitated. Then, a faint heartbeat returned. Everyone inside released a breath they didn't realize they had been holding, except Mercer. His jaw tightened. For the first time all night, he looked disappointed. Maya noticed. She couldn't ignore it anymore. Normal officers celebrated when lives were saved. Mercer looked frustrated. Why? Before she could think further, another patrol cruiser pulled up behind his vehicle. 2 younger officers stepped out. One glanced into the ambulance. What happened? Mercer answered before anyone else could speak. Possible criminal investigation. The rookie looked confused. Against who? Mercer pointed directly at Maya. Here. The word stunned everyone. Luis exploded. She's trying to save his life. Mercer calmly removed a pair of handcuffs from his duty belt. If she interferes again, he let the metal cuffs dangle where Maya could clearly see them. I'll arrest her for obstructing a police investigation. The rookie officer hesitated. Sir, should we maybe let EMS transport first? Mercer's stare became ice cold. Did I ask for your opinion? The young officer immediately fell silent. Maya looked from one face to another. Fear was spreading. Not because Mercer was right, because no one was willing to challenge him. Then, almost unnoticed beneath the stretcher, veteran paramedic Luis quietly reached toward a small black emergency switch hidden under the frame. Without looking at anyone, he pressed it. No light flashed. No alarm sounded. Nothing appeared to happen. Mercer never noticed. But somewhere far away, a secure signal had just been transmitted. Maya didn't know what Luis had done. She only saw him give the slightest nod before returning to the patient's side. Outside, thunder rolled across the dark sky. Far beyond the highway, a faint rhythmic sound began echoing through the storm. It wasn't thunder. It wasn't traffic. It sounded like helicopter blades cutting through the rain. And Officer Daniel Mercer, who had looked completely confident only moments before, slowly lifted his head toward the sky. For the first time, his expression changed. The distant thumping of helicopter blades grew louder with every passing second. Officer Daniel Mercer looked toward the dark sky for only a moment before forcing a confident smile back onto his face. It's probably the news, he muttered. But Dr. Maya Brooks noticed something else. For the first time that night, Mercer looked uncertain. Inside the ambulance, the patient remained unconscious. His heartbeat had returned, but only barely. Luis checked the monitor again. Heart rate's unstable. Oxygen saturation, 81 and dropping. Maya immediately adjusted the ventilator and hung another unit of blood. Come on, stay with me. The patient suddenly began convulsing. His blood pressure collapsed again. Luis cursed under his breath. "We're losing him." Maya grabbed another syringe. "I need norepinephrine." She pushed the medication into the IV line while another paramedic stabilized the airway. Seconds later, the monitor began climbing. 30. Forte. 50 beats per minute. Luis finally released a long breath. "We've got him back." Before anyone could celebrate, bang! The rear ambulance doors flew open. Mercer climbed inside without permission. I said nobody touches the patient. Maya stood directly in front of him. "I just saved his life." "You disobeyed a lawful order. There is no law that allows you to stop emergency treatment." Mercer stepped closer until they were only inches apart. "You think anyone's going to believe you over a police officer?" The words hung heavily inside the ambulance. Maya stared into his eyes. For the first time, she wasn't simply angry. She was afraid. Not for herself, for her patient. Because Mercer wasn't acting like someone trying to enforce procedure. He was acting like someone desperately trying to delay something. Or someone. Outside, the rain continued pouring as more civilians gathered behind the patrol cars. Nearly everyone had a phone raised. Videos streamed live across social media. Comments flooded in. "Why are police stopping an ambulance? That patient is dying. Let the doctors work." Mercer noticed the growing audience. Instead of backing down, he became even more aggressive. He turned toward the crowd and shouted, "This ambulance is under investigation. Anyone interfering may be detained." Several people stepped backward. Others kept filming. One elderly woman yelled, "She's trying to save a man's life." Mercer ignored her. He reached toward the patient's blanket. Maya instantly caught his wrist. "Don't." Their eyes locked. For 2 long seconds, neither moved. Luis quietly shifted his body closer. The other paramedics exchanged nervous glances. One wrong move. Everything could explode. Mercer's radio suddenly crackled. Static. Then a voice. "Unit 12? Status?" Mercer grabbed the microphone before anyone else could respond. "Situation under control." A pause followed. "Confirmed transport delay?" Mercer's answer came too quickly. "Confirmed." "Maya Froze. Transport delay?" Nobody from normal dispatch would ask that question. Dispatch would ask about patient condition, estimated arrival, medical support, not transport delay. Mercer immediately realized what he had revealed. He switched channels. Too late. Maya had heard enough. She looked toward Luis. He had heard it too. Neither said a word, but both now knew the same thing. This stop had been planned. Inside the ambulance, the unconscious man's fingers twitched again. His eyes slowly opened. Barely. He struggled to focus. Maya leaned close. "You need to stay still." He looked directly at her. Then toward Mercer. Pure terror filled his face. His lips trembled. "No." His breathing accelerated. "No." He lifted one shaking finger, not toward Maya, toward Officer Mercer. The patient tried to speak. Mercer immediately stepped forward. "He's delirious." The patient's eyes widened even further. Summoning every remaining ounce of strength, he forced out 4 broken words. "He works with them." His body suddenly went limp. The monitor screamed again, blood pressure crashing. Luis looked up. "He's coding." Everyone rushed into action. Maya shoved Mercer aside. "Move." She climbed over the stretcher. Chest compression. Airway. Medication. Everything happened in practiced rhythm. Mercer stumbled backward against the ambulance wall. For a brief second, nobody was watching him. His hand slipped into his pocket. He quickly pulled out his phone, typed one short message, then deleted the screen before anyone noticed. Except one teenage boy standing outside. The boy had been recording everything since the traffic stop began. His camera zoomed in, captured Mercer's phone, captured his face, captured the exact moment he secretly sent the message. The teenager frowned. That's weird. Without realizing it, he had just recorded one of the most important pieces of evidence of the entire night. Miles away, inside a secure federal operations center, a large digital map suddenly flashed red. A silent alarm echoed through the room. An analyst looked up from his workstation. Signal received. Another agent turned. Source confirmed. Emergency beacon from Ambulance 12. A supervisor immediately stood. Visual feed? The analyst pressed several keys. Seconds later, live video from the ambulance's hidden emergency camera appeared across multiple monitors. Everyone in the room fell silent. The supervisor watched Mercer block treatment, watched the equipment thrown into the rain, watched Maya fighting to save the patient. Then he quietly spoke 6 words that changed everything. Deploy every nearby response team. Within seconds, agents throughout the region received the same encrypted order. Black SUVs accelerated onto highways. Armored tactical vehicles left federal garages. A helicopter altered course toward the scene. Back on the highway, neither Maya nor Mercer had any idea that dozens of federal agents were already racing toward them. Maya finally restored another weak heartbeat. She leaned against the stretcher, exhausted. Luis looked toward the dark horizon. The sound of helicopter blades was no longer distant. It was almost overhead. Mercer heard it too. This time, his confidence disappeared completely. Then, beyond the curtain of rain, flashing landing lights appeared in the sky. And for the first time that night, Officer Daniel Mercer whispered words no one else was supposed to hear. "No, they're here already?" The rhythmic thunder of helicopter blades now dominated the storm. Every person on the highway looked toward the dark clouds. Every person except Officer Daniel Mercer. He wasn't watching the sky anymore. He was watching his watch. His fingers tapped nervously against his duty belt. 5 seconds. 10. 15. As though he were waiting for someone else to arrive before the helicopter did. Dr. Maya Brooks noticed every movement. She had spent years studying tiny changes in breathing, posture, and eye movement to recognize trauma in patients. Now she was seeing something entirely different. Fear. Not the fear of making a mistake. The fear of running out of time. Luis quietly leaned beside her. "You see it too?" She nodded. "He's expecting someone." Before either of them could say another word, another pair of headlights appeared through the rain. A black pickup truck slowed beside the police cruisers. 2 men stepped out. Neither wore uniforms, dark jackets, baseball caps pulled low. Neither looked toward the gathering crowd. Instead, both looked directly into the ambulance. Mercer's shoulders visibly relaxed. He walked toward them immediately. The 3 men spoke only a few feet away, their voices nearly drowned by the rain. Maya couldn't hear the conversation, but she didn't need to. The body language said enough. Mercer wasn't questioning them. He was taking instructions. One of the strangers pointed toward the ambulance, then toward the hospital in the distance. Mercer nodded once. The men returned to the truck without another word. Instead of leaving, they parked behind the patrol cars. Waiting. Luis frowned. "Those aren't police." "No, they're here for him." Maya looked at her unconscious patient. Or maybe, they were here because of him. Inside the ambulance, another alarm sounded. Oxygen saturation had dropped below 78. Luis immediately adjusted the ventilator. "We need to move now." Maya checked the patient's pupils. Still reactive. Barely. She opened another medication kit. Just as she reached for a syringe, Mercer climbed back inside. "I told you treatment stops." Maya didn't even look up. "I'm done asking your permission." She inserted the medication. Mercer's face hardened. "I warned you." He grabbed her shoulder. Hard. She jerked free. "Take your hands off me." Instead, Mercer reached for the syringe. It slipped from Maya's hand. The medication splashed across the ambulance floor. "No." Luis stared in disbelief. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Mercer shrugged. "Accidents happen." Maya's patience snapped. That medication could have kept him alive. Mercer's expression remained completely blank. "Then find another one." The paramedics searched frantically through the remaining supplies. Nothing. That had been the last preloaded syringe. Maya improvised another dose by drawing medication directly from a vial with trembling hands. Every extra second mattered. The patient's heartbeat weakened again. Beep, beep. Longer gaps. Luis checked the monitor. Pressure's crashing. Maya pushed the medication. "Come on." Slowly. The heartbeat stabilized once more. Mercer watched silently. His disappointment was impossible to hide. For the second time that night, saving the man's life seemed to irritate him. Outside, dozens of people continued filming. Live streams spread across multiple social media platforms. Comments exploded by the thousands. "Why is that officer blocking an ambulance? Someone arrest that cop. The doctor is risking everything. This can't be legal." Several local news stations began rebroadcasting clips before anyone even understood the full story. Back inside the ambulance, the patient suddenly coughed violently. Blood stained the oxygen mask. His eyes fluttered open. This time they remained open longer. He looked directly at Maya. Recognition filled his face. "You." His voice barely existed. "I know." Maya leaned closer. "Don't force yourself." He struggled to breathe. "They." His gaze shifted toward Mercer. Instant panic filled his eyes. "No." Mercer immediately stepped closer. "He's hallucinating." The patient shook his head with surprising determination. Using every ounce of remaining strength, he whispered, "Flash." "What?" Maya asked. "Drive." "What flash drive?" His trembling hands slowly lifted beneath the blanket, not toward his chest, not toward his pocket, toward the underside of the stretcher. Then he lost consciousness again. Maya followed the direction of his finger. The underside of the stretcher. Something hidden there? Before she could investigate, Mercer's radio crackled once more. A calm voice asked, "Status update." Mercer turned away from everyone, still delayed. The reply came almost instantly. "You have 3 minutes." 3 minutes. Maya's eyes widened. 3 minutes until what? Mercer looked at his watch again, exactly the same way he had been doing for the past several minutes. Louise quietly whispered, "He's counting down." She nodded. So are they. Neither knew who they were, but whatever was supposed to happen, it was close, very close. High above the highway, the helicopter finally broke through the clouds. Its spotlight swept across the rain-covered roadway. Every civilian looked upward. Mercer looked furious. "Not yet," he whispered. The helicopter did not land. Instead, it circled once, twice, as if searching, then disappeared behind the storm again. Mercer's confidence partially returned. They missed us. Maya wasn't so sure. Something about that helicopter felt deliberate, almost like it was waiting for confirmation. Meanwhile, 30 miles away, inside one of the speeding federal SUVs, Supervisory Special Agent Rebecca Sloan studied the live ambulance feed on a secure tablet. Every second of Mercer's actions had been recorded. The destroyed medical supplies, the blocked treatment, the physical intimidation, the mysterious visitors, the coded radio transmissions. She looked toward the tactical driver. "Distance? 4 minutes." Rebecca shook her head. "Too long." She picked up an encrypted radio. "Air 1. This is command." A pilot answered immediately. "Go ahead. Keep them exactly where they are." "What about local law enforcement?" Rebecca's voice turned ice cold. "Treat everyone except the ambulance crew as potentially compromised." Silence filled the helicopter cockpit. Then came the reply. "Understood." Back on the highway, Mercer suddenly removed his phone again. He glanced toward the black pickup. One of the two strangers gave him a subtle nod. Mercer slowly reached toward his holster. Maya saw it. Louise saw it. Neither understood why, but both instinctively knew. The next few moments would decide whether their patient lived long enough to reveal the truth. And somewhere beneath the stretcher, hidden where almost no one would think to look, rested the secret that powerful people were willing to kill to protect. The rain continued pounding the ambulance as if the storm itself were trying to erase what was happening on that lonely stretch of highway. Officer Daniel Mercer kept one hand resting near his holster while pretending to watch the helicopter circling overhead. Dr. Maya Brooks wasn't looking at him anymore. She was looking beneath the stretcher. The dying man's trembling finger had pointed there only moments earlier. There had to be a reason. "Luis," she whispered. He understood immediately. Without drawing attention, he positioned himself between Mercer and the stretcher. "What are you doing?" Mercer barked. Checking the wheel locks, Luis answered calmly. Mercer narrowed his eyes but remained where he was. It was enough. Maya dropped to one knee and reached underneath the metal frame. Her fingertips brushed cold steel. Then, something taped tightly against the underside. A small, waterproof package. She carefully pulled it free. Inside was a black encrypted flash drive no larger than her thumb. Before she could examine it, "Doctor." A calm voice came from outside the ambulance. Everyone turned. A man wearing an ordinary rain jacket stood behind the crowd, holding an umbrella like any stranded traveler. Nothing about him attracted attention, except his eyes. They never left the flash drive in Maya's hand. He gave the slightest shake of his head. "Hide it." Maya reacted instinctively. She slipped the drive into the inside pocket of her rain-soaked jacket just before Mercer stepped closer. "What did you just pick up?" "Medical supplies. I want to see them. They're sterile equipment." I said hand them over. Maya stood her ground. "No." For a brief moment, the highway became completely silent. Even the civilians stopped talking. Mercer's face darkened. "You are obstructing an active police investigation." "I'm protecting my patient." "No." He stepped even closer. "You're protecting evidence." The word hit Maya like lightning. Evidence. How did Mercer know there was evidence beneath the stretcher? She had never mentioned finding anything. Neither had Luis. Only one conclusion made sense. Mercer already knew it had been there. Her suspicion was no longer a theory. It was certainty. The ambulance had never been stopped randomly. The patient had never been delayed by coincidence. Everything had been planned. Mercer suddenly reached toward her jacket. "I'll take that." Maya slapped his hand away. "You don't have a warrant." "I don't need one." "You do if you're searching me." For the first time that night, several people in the crowd applauded. Others shouted, "Leave her alone. She's a doctor. Help the patient." Phones remained pointed toward the ambulance. Thousands, perhaps millions, were now watching online. Mercer realized public opinion was shifting against him. His jaw tightened. Then his shoulder radio crackled. A different voice this time. Short. Urgent. Abort if necessary. Only 4 words. But Maya heard every one of them. Abort? Abort what? Mercer didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked toward the black pickup truck. The 2 unidentified men had opened their doors. One quietly reached beneath his jacket. Luis noticed. So did Maya. They're moving, Luis whispered. Maya's pulse raced. Before anyone could react, the man in the rain jacket, the stranger who had silently warned Maya, began walking toward the ambulance. Mercer instantly blocked his path. Areas closed. The stranger calmly reached into his pocket. Mercer's hand flew to his weapon. So did the 2 men by the pickup. The entire crowd gasped. Slowly, the stranger removed a simple hospital visitor's identification card. My wife is in surgery at the trauma center, he said politely. The road closure forced me over here. Mercer studied him for several seconds. Something felt wrong. The man was too calm, too observant, too controlled. But there was nothing suspicious enough to justify an arrest. Get back. The stranger nodded obediently. As he turned away, he briefly looked toward Maya again. This time, he subtly touched his left ear. An earpiece. It lasted less than half a second. Most people never would have noticed. Maya did, whoever he was. He wasn't an ordinary civilian. He was watching Mercer, not her. Inside the ambulance, the patient suddenly inhaled sharply. His eyelids fluttered. Maya, Louise called. She rushed back. The man looked terrified. Not confused. Terrified. He grabbed Maya's sleeve with surprising strength. His breathing became ragged. They know. It's okay, Maya whispered. No. He shook his head desperately. They know. Who? He coughed violently. Blood stained his lips. Then, forcing out every remaining ounce of strength, he whispered, The judges. Maya froze. Judges? Before she could ask another question, he added 2 more words. Not police. His grip loosened. He slipped unconscious again. Maya stared at him. This conspiracy was bigger than corrupt officers. Much bigger. Mercer had been trying to silence someone connected to judges, government officials, perhaps even federal contract. The flash drive suddenly felt far more dangerous than she had imagined. Miles away, Supervisory Special Agent Rebecca Sloan continued watching the encrypted ambulance feed. She replayed the patient's final words. The judges. Her expression changed instantly. She looked toward another agent. Cross-reference operation, Iron Ledger. The analyst's fingers flew across the keyboard. Seconds later, a classified file appeared. The analyst swallowed hard. Oh my God. Rebecca looked at the screen. The patient's photograph appeared beside another identity. Nathan Ellis, former chief financial officer of Horizon Biomedical Systems, federal protected witness, scheduled to testify in 48 hours, against 8 corporate executives, 3 state officials, 2 judges, and multiple members of local law enforcement. Rebecca immediately grabbed her radio. All units. Her voice became sharp. The witness is confirmed. She paused only long enough to take a breath. Priority level has changed. What level? The tactical commander asked. Rebecca answered without hesitation. Level black. The SUV driver accelerated harder. Sirens remained off. Lights remained dark. No one on the highway could know they were coming. Back at the ambulance, Mercer suddenly looked at his watch again. His phone vibrated. He read the message. Every trace of confidence vanished from his face. He slowly looked toward the helicopter still circling overhead. Then toward the highway behind him, far beyond the curtain of rain. Tiny flashes of white headlights appeared. Not 1 pair, not 2. En un tir convoi. Mercer's breathing became shallow. He whispered almost to himself. They weren't supposed to get here this fast. And for the first time since stopping the ambulance, Officer Daniel Mercer took 1 small step backward. Officer Daniel Mercer stared at the approaching headlights before forcing himself to breathe normally. No, he muttered under his breath. I still have time. He turned sharply toward the 2 men waiting beside the black pickup. One barely nodded. That was all the confirmation Mercer needed. His expression hardened once again. He wasn't going to run. He was going to finish what he had started. Mercer marched back to the ambulance and pointed directly at Dr. Maya Brooks. Step away from the patient. Maya didn't move. I said, step away. My patient is alive because I ignored you. Mercer's jaw tightened. You're under investigation for interfering with law enforcement. Luis stepped between them. That's absurd. Mercer immediately pulled out his handcuffs. Then both of you can explain yourselves downtown. The metallic click echoed through the ambulance. Several people in the crowd gasped. A woman shouted, "She's saving his life!" Another man yelled, "Everyone's recording this!" Mercer didn't care. He grabbed Maya's wrist. "You're under arrest." She jerked her arm free. "I haven't committed a crime. You'll let the court decide that. I'll let every camera here decide what really happened." Mercer's eyes flashed with anger. Without another word, he lunged forward and snapped one cuff around Maya's left wrist. The cold steel locked with a sharp click. Luis immediately grabbed Mercer's forearm. "You've lost your mind!" Mercer shoved him backward. Luis slammed into the ambulance wall. Medical trays crashed onto the floor. The patient suddenly began seizing violently. His oxygen tubing slipped free. "Maya!" one paramedic shouted. Ignoring the handcuff hanging from her wrist, Maya rushed back toward the stretcher. Mercer blocked her path. "No treatment. He'll die. That's not your decision anymore." Maya looked directly into his eyes. For the first time all night, she no longer saw an officer. She saw a desperate man cornered by the truth. "You aren't trying to arrest me," she said quietly. "You're trying to make sure he never reaches that hospital." Mercer's face remained expressionless, but the silence answered her. Outside, thunder shook the highway. The mysterious man in the rain jacket had quietly moved farther down the shoulder. His hand rested inside his coat, not on a weapon, on a concealed radio. He spoke only 3 words. "Target escalating now." Almost instantly, a calm voice answered through his earpiece. "Hold position." Back inside the ambulance, the patient suddenly opened his eyes again. This time they were clear, focused. He looked directly at Maya. With enormous effort, he whispered, "Pocket?" "My pocket?" He blinked once. "Your." Confused, Maya instinctively reached into the inside pocket of her rain jacket. Her fingers touched the encrypted flash drive. The patient gave the faintest nod, then whispered one final sentence. "Don't trust local." His eyes closed again. The monitor slowed. Luis immediately checked his pulse. "We're losing him again." Maya tried to move past Mercer. He refused. "I'm not asking again." She lifted the handcuff still hanging from her wrist. "If he dies while you stand here, every person watching this will know exactly why." For a split second, Mercer hesitated. Then his phone vibrated. He looked down. Only 2 words appeared on the screen. "Finish it." His face drained of color. The order hadn't come from him. It had come from someone above him. Someone who no longer cared whether he survived, only that the witness didn't. Mercer slowly slid his phone back into his pocket. Then he made the decision that would destroy his life forever. He reached for the patient's ventilator tubing. Luis saw it first. "What are you doing?" Mercer's fingers wrapped around the oxygen line. "If there's no witness." He never finished the sentence. The mysterious man in the rain jacket suddenly shouted, "Federal! Don't move!" Everything exploded into motion. Mercer instinctively spun toward the voice. The stranger had already produced a compact federal badge in one hand while reaching for his sidearm with the other. The 2 men beside the black pickup immediately fled toward their vehicle. Tires spun wildly across the wet pavement. The pickup roared onto the shoulder. At that exact moment, the helicopter's searchlight locked onto the fleeing truck like daylight. A deafening voice thundered from overhead. "Federal agents, stop the vehicle immediately!" The pickup accelerated instead. Seconds later, the distant convoy that Mercer had been watching burst through the rain. 1, 3, 6. 12 black SUVs raced onto the highway in perfect formation. Armored tactical vehicles followed close behind. Blue and red emergency lights ignited the storm. The civilians watching from the roadside stepped back in stunned silence. Mercer looked from the convoy, to the helicopter, to the federal agent now aiming directly at him. For the first time that night, he realized there was nowhere left to run. And inside the ambulance, while chaos erupted outside, Maya quietly slipped the encrypted flash drive deeper into her jacket. She had no idea what secrets it contained, but judging by the army of federal vehicles surrounding the highway, it was valuable enough to bring an entire conspiracy crashing down. Blue and red emergency lights exploded across the rain-soaked highway. The convoy of black SUVs came to a synchronized stop, surrounding every patrol car, the black pickup, and the ambulance within seconds. Doors flew open. Men and women in black tactical gear poured onto the pavement with astonishing precision. "Federal agents, drop your weapons!" The command echoed through the storm. Officer Daniel Mercer instinctively reached toward his holster. "Don't!" the undercover federal agent shouted. Mercer froze. More than 20 laser sights instantly settled on his chest. There was no escape. The two men from the black pickup tried anyway. The driver slammed the truck into reverse, spraying water and gravel across the highway. The helicopter overhead immediately tracked them with its spotlight. Vehicle attempting to flee. Before the pickup had traveled 50 yards, two armored federal SUVs blocked both lanes ahead. Another tactical vehicle cut off the shoulder. The truck screeched sideways. 4 federal agents surrounded it. Within seconds, both suspects were dragged out face first onto the wet asphalt and handcuffed. Back at the ambulance, Mercer looked around in disbelief. This is a local police operation," he shouted. "You have no jurisdiction here." A calm female voice answered behind him. "Oh, we absolutely do." Every head turned. A tall woman in a black raincoat stepped out of the lead SUV. She removed her hood, revealing Supervisory Special Agent Rebecca Sloan. She walked toward Mercer without the slightest hesitation, rain running down her jacket. "You've been expecting someone else tonight, haven't you, Officer Mercer?" Mercer forced a laugh. "I don't know what you're talking about." Rebecca stopped only a few feet away. "You've said that in every interview we've secretly recorded over the last 7 months." Mercer's smile disappeared. "What?" She nodded toward another agent. "Play it." An agent placed a rugged tablet on the hood of a federal SUV. Audio crackled through an external speaker. Mercer's own voice filled the highway. "Delay the transport." Another recording followed. "Keep him alive, only until we know where the drive is." Then another. "No witness. No testimony." The civilians standing along the roadside fell completely silent. Several looked at Mercer in horror. Luis slowly lowered his head. "So that's why." Maya stared at Mercer. Every terrible suspicion she had fought to ignore was suddenly real. Mercer wasn't acting alone. He had been following orders all night. Rebecca looked directly into his eyes. "You've obstructed emergency medical treatment. You abused your authority. You conspired to murder a protected federal witness. You tampered with an ongoing federal investigation." She paused, and every single second of it was recorded. Mercer's breathing became uneven. He glanced toward the patrol officers who had arrived earlier. Neither moved. Neither defended him. One of the younger officers slowly removed his own duty belt and placed it on the hood of his cruiser before quietly stepping away. "I didn't know," he said. "I swear I didn't know." Rebecca nodded once. "We know." Mercer suddenly shouted, "You don't have the evidence." Maya felt every federal agent's eyes shift toward her. Rebecca slowly turned. "Dr. Brooks." "Yes?" "Did the witness give you anything?" For a brief second, Maya hesitated. She remembered the dying man's trembling hand. The hidden package. His final warning. Don't trust local. Without another word, she reached inside her jacket. The encrypted flash drive rested safely in her palm. Gasps spread through the crowd. Mercer's face turned completely white. "No." Rebecca accepted the drive with extraordinary care. She handed it to a forensic technician waiting beside her. "Verify immediately." The technician connected it to a secured, portable forensic computer inside one of the SUVs. Everyone waited. Rain continued falling. Only the sound of keyboard clicks broke the silence. 30 seconds. 1 minute. Then, "I've got it." The technician looked up. "It's authentic." Rebecca stepped closer. "What does it contain?" The technician swallowed hard. "Financial records." He continued scrolling. "Encrypted communications." Another folder opened. "Judicial payment schedules." Another. "Police payroll." Another. "Videofiles." His eyes widened. There are over 4,000 documents. A heavy silence settled across the highway. Rebecca looked back at Mercer. "So that's what you were willing to let an innocent man die for?" Mercer didn't answer. He couldn't, because at that exact moment, another black SUV arrived. Its doors opened. 2 elderly men stepped out wearing dark business suits instead of tactical uniforms. Every federal agent immediately straightened. Rebecca herself nodded respectfully. The older of the two quietly looked toward the ambulance. "Is Nathan Ellis alive?" Maya answered before anyone else. "Barely." The man exhaled in visible relief. "Then we still have a case." Mercer stared. He recognized the newcomer immediately. His knees nearly gave way. It wasn't another agent. It was the senior federal prosecutor leading the largest public corruption case in the state. Everything Mercer believed he had delayed, everything he thought he had prevented, was still alive. Rebecca looked toward Maya. "Doctor." "Yes?" "Can your patient survive another 10 minutes?" Maya checked the monitor. Weak heartbeat. Falling pressure. She looked back. "If we leave now." Rebecca nodded firmly. "Then no one stops that ambulance again." She turned sharply toward her tactical team. "Clear the route." Within seconds, federal vehicles pulled into formation. The helicopter shifted ahead to provide aerial escort. Armored SUVs positioned themselves in front and behind the ambulance. What had begun as one officer unlawfully stopping an emergency vehicle had transformed into one of the most heavily protected medical transports in the state's history. As Maya climbed back into the ambulance, she looked once more at Officer Daniel Mercer. Only an hour earlier, he had mocked her, threatened her, and nearly arrested her. Now he stood alone in the pouring rain, surrounded by federal agents reading him his constitutional rights. And yet Rebecca Sloan wasn't finished. As Mercer was placed in handcuffs, she quietly said one sentence that made him close his eyes in defeat. "We haven't even told you who else has been arrested tonight." The ambulance doors slammed shut. Within seconds, the federal convoy surged onto the highway. 2 armored SUVs led the way. 4 tactical vehicles sealed the rear. The helicopter hovered overhead, its searchlight sweeping every overpass and exit ramp. For the first time that night, Dr. Maya Brooks could focus on only one thing: saving Nathan Ellis. Luis accelerated through the cleared highway. No traffic, no police roadblocks, no delays, only a direct path to the Federal Medical Trauma Center. Inside the ambulance, Maya adjusted another blood transfusion. Nathan's pulse remained dangerously weak. She leaned closer. "Nathan." His eyelids fluttered. "You made it." He slowly opened his eyes. This time, there was no panic, only exhaustion. "They didn't stop us?" "No." She smiled for the first time that night. "They never will again." A faint smile crossed Nathan's face before he slipped back into unconsciousness. 23 minutes later, the ambulance rolled directly into the secured emergency entrance of the Federal Medical Trauma Center. The moment the doors opened, an entire surgical team rushed forward. Massive internal bleeding, blood pressure 60/40. "Prepare operating room 3. Nathan disappeared behind swinging operating room doors. Maya finally stopped moving. Only then did she realize her hands were still shaking. Her rain-soaked clothes were stained with blood and mud. One of the nurses gently handed her a towel. "You saved him." Maya looked toward the operating room. "I just hope it's enough." Before she could sit down, Rebecca Sloan entered the waiting area. She carried a thick, classified case file. "It's over." Maya looked at her. "Is it?" Rebecca slowly shook her head. "No. It's finally beginning." She placed several photographs across a nearby table. Maya immediately recognized Officer Daniel Mercer, but dozens of other faces surrounded his picture. Police captains, corporate executives, hasta senator, judges, hospital administrators. Maya looked up in disbelief. "All of them?" Rebecca nodded. "For years." She opened another folder. The flash drive didn't just contain financial records. It contained insurance fraud, illegal medical contract, bribery payments, judicial rulings purchased with cash. She paused. And lists of witnesses who were supposed to disappear before trial. Maya felt cold. Nathan copied everything. He spent almost 2 years collecting evidence. Rebecca removed one final photograph, a smiling woman wearing a business suit. "Who is she?" Rebecca answered quietly. "His wife." Maya noticed the black ribbon printed across the corner. "She died?" Rebecca nodded. "Officially." Silence filled the room. "What do you mean officially?" Rebecca looked directly into Maya's eyes. They ruled it a car accident. She slid another document across the table. Crash scene photographs. Brake line analysis. Federal forensic reports. It wasn't an accident. Maya slowly closed her eyes. Nathan hadn't spent 2 years risking his life for money. He'd been fighting for justice. For his wife. Rebecca continued. After her death, Nathan realized the corruption reached farther than anyone imagined. He started copying every payment, every encrypted email, every hidden account. He became our confidential witness, Maya whispered. And tonight, they tried to silence the last person who could prove everything. Rebecca nodded. But they failed. Meanwhile, 3 floors below the federal courthouse detention center, Officer Daniel Mercer sat alone inside an interrogation room. His wet uniform had been replaced with a gray detention jumpsuit. Across the table sat 2 federal investigators. Neither had asked a single question yet. Instead, they simply placed photographs one after another in front of him. Mercer receiving unexplained deposits. Mercer meeting the 2 men from the pickup truck. Mercer's patrol vehicle following Nathan's car 3 nights before the explosion. Finally, a screenshot from the ambulance's hidden camera. It showed Mercer reaching toward Nathan's oxygen tubing. Mercer's breathing became uneven. One investigator quietly interrupted him. "Before you speak." He pushed another folder across the table. Inside were signed arrest warrants. 1, 5, 10, 23 names. Mercer's eyes widened. They've all been arrested? The investigator nodded. Simultaneously, Mercer slowly recognized familiar names. His lieutenant, his captain, a judge, the district procurement director, the chief financial officer of Horizon Biomedical Systems. Every person who had promised to protect him had been taken into custody within the same hour. His shoulders collapsed. They told me nobody could touch us. The investigator calmly replied. They underestimated one thing. Mercer looked up. What? The truth survives longer than lies. Late that evening, Rebecca walked into the hospital's secure intensive care unit. Nathan remained unconscious but alive. Doctors expected him to recover. She looked toward Maya. The prosecutor asked me to thank you. I was just doing my job. Rebecca smiled. No. You were doing the right thing when everyone else told you to stop. She handed Maya a folded document. What is this? A federal commendation. Maya looked surprised. I don't need an award. Rebecca gently shook her head. It's not an award. It's proof. Proof that when they tried to rewrite the truth, someone refused to let them. At that moment, a young federal forensic technician hurried into the ICU. Director Sloan. What is it? We finished decrypting the final folder. Rebecca immediately stood. What did we find? The technician swallowed. There was one more hidden file. What kind of file? He looked toward Maya before answering. A complete list. Rebecca frowned. Of what? The technician's face turned pale. Every public official who accepted payments. Every officer who helped cover it up. And, he hesitated. There's one name at the very top. Whose? The technician slowly turned the laptop screen toward Rebecca. The moment she read it, every trace of color disappeared from her face. She immediately closed the computer, looked toward the ICU door, then quietly ordered every nearby agent, lock this floor down. Maya stared at her. What happened? Rebecca answered in a voice barely above a whisper. If this name is real, this case is even bigger than we thought. The intensive care floor fell silent. Federal agents immediately secured every entrance. No one entered. No one left. Dr. Maya Brooks watched Rebecca Sloan carefully lock the laptop containing the final decrypted file into a reinforced evidence case. What name was on that list? Maya asked quietly. Rebecca looked at her for a long moment before answering. The person we've been chasing was never hiding behind Officer Mercer. She took a slow breath. He was hiding above him. Within 30 minutes, the conference room inside the Federal Medical Trauma Center became the temporary command center for the largest public corruption investigation the state had ever seen. The decrypted file filled 3 large monitors. Every payment, every secret account, every recorded phone call, every illegal judicial ruling. At the very top of the organization chart appeared one final name, Attorney General Richard Holloway. The room became completely still. No one spoke. One senior prosecutor finally whispered, "That explains everything." Rebecca nodded. He controlled the investigations. He controlled which judges received certain cases. He controlled which police departments were protected. And whenever someone got too close, she looked toward Nathan's ICU room. They disappeared. Another federal agent rushed inside. "Ma'am." Rebecca turned. "The arrest teams are in position." She checked her watch. "Execute every warrant." Across the state, before sunrise, dozens of simultaneous operations began. Federal agents entered luxury homes, courthouses, government offices, corporate headquarters. No sittings, no warnings, only sealed warrants signed weeks earlier, waiting for one final piece of evidence. The flash drive had provided it. Television stations interrupted morning programming. Breaking news. State Attorney General arrested in massive federal corruption investigation. Images flooded every network. Richard Holloway being escorted from his mansion in handcuffs. Police chiefs leaving headquarters surrounded by federal agents. Judges surrendering outside courthouses. Corporate executives escorted from glass office towers. The corruption network that had operated for years collapsed in a single morning. 3 days later, Nathan Ellis opened his eyes inside the intensive care unit. Maya was the first person he saw. He smiled weakly. "I thought I wasn't going to make it." She smiled back. "You almost didn't." His expression became serious. "The drive? It's safe. The trial?" Rebecca Sloan entered the room carrying a newspaper. She placed it beside Nathan's bed. The headline covered the entire front page. "Federal sweep ends years of public corruption." Rebecca smiled. "You'll testify." Nathan slowly closed his eyes. Not from exhaustion, from relief. For the first time since his wife's murder, justice finally seemed possible. 6 months later, the federal courthouse overflowed with reporters. Families of victims filled every seat inside the courtroom. Nathan Ellis calmly testified for nearly 6 hours. Every document matched the flash drive. Every payment was verified. Every recording authenticated. One by one, defendants who had once believed themselves untouchable accepted plea agreements. Others were convicted after lengthy trials. Officer Daniel Mercer received multiple federal convictions, including obstruction of justice, conspiracy to commit murder, abuse of official authority, and interference with emergency medical treatment. He would spend decades in federal prison. Richard Holloway resigned in disgrace before receiving his own sentence. The judges involved permanently lost their positions. Millions of dollars in illegal assets were seized. New statewide protections were introduced for emergency medical transports, ensuring that no officer could ever unlawfully delay life-saving treatment without immediate independent review. Nearly 1 year after the storm, Franklin Regional Medical Center held a small ceremony. There were no television cameras, no political speeches, only hospital staff gathered in the emergency department where everything had begun. The hospital director stepped onto the stage. Most heroes never expect recognition. He looked toward Maya. They simply refused to abandon the people depending on them. The room erupted into applause. Maya accepted a framed certificate before quietly placing it on a nearby table. She smiled. "I didn't save this case." She looked around the room. "We all did." She nodded toward Luis, the paramedics, the nurses, and every member of the emergency team. If any one of us had given up, the truth would have died in that ambulance. Luis laughed softly. "You still don't like taking credit." She smiled. Medicine was never about credit. It's about giving someone one more chance to live. Across the room, Rebecca Sloan approached with a small wooden box. Inside rested the encrypted flash drive. It had been permanently preserved after the trial. Rebecca handed it to Maya. "It belongs in the hospital museum." Maya looked surprised. "Why here?" Rebecca answered gently. "Because this wasn't the story of a witness. It wasn't the story of corrupt politicians. It wasn't even the story of federal agents." She looked directly into Maya's eyes. It was the story of one doctor who refused to stop saving a life when everyone else told her to. Maya quietly closed the wooden box. Outside the hospital, sunlight finally broke through the clouds. The same highway where hatred, corruption, and fear had nearly claimed another innocent life now carried ordinary traffic once again. Most drivers would never know what had happened there. But the people who had lived that night would remember forever, not because powerful people had fallen, but because one ordinary act of courage had proven something corruption could never erase. The truth only needs one person brave enough to protect it. Real courage isn't measured by power, titles, or authority. It's measured by the choice to do what's right when standing up for the truth may cost you everything. If this story touched your heart, share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear where you're watching from. And don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring stories about justice, hope, and the strength of ordinary people.